Hello Internet, welcome to my channel. I'm Chameleon X, and if you've been around my channel for a while, you might be aware that I'm something of an apologist for 4th edition D&D. I can acknowledge its flaws, and I understand many of the complaints people have had about it, but 4E will always have a place in my heart. It was the edition that brought me into this hobby and brought me out of my shell. It's because of D&D that I have friends, a family, and this channel, and I have 4th edition to thank for most of that. So when I saw this thumbnail on my YouTube feed, I got very excited. For those who don't recognize it, Dungeon Dad is a YouTube channel that I've been following for a while. Josiah, the eponymous labyrinthine padre, has a series called Monster of the Week, wherein he delves into a selected creature from past editions of Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder. He talks about their lore, development history, and potential plot hooks to bring them into your game, and converts those monsters to 5th edition mechanics. The subject of this video is the Adamantine Dragon. As Josiah explains, this beast debuted in 2nd edition as the Adamantite Dragon, a planar dragon native to the plane of Bitopia. Its name was later changed and it was ported to 3rd edition. For more information on this guy, I would highly recommend checking out Dungeon Dad's original video, which I'll link in the description. But where this story gets interesting is in the Monster Manual 2 for 4th edition, where Wizards of the Coast debuted this edition's version of the Metallic Dragons, historically D&D's good guy dragons, and bitter enemies of the evil Chromatic Dragons. Well, like a lot of things in 4E, WotC decided to shake the boat. Metallic Dragons had always been presented a bit of a problem for DMs in that they were traditionally good aligned, so there wasn't really any reason for your players to fight them unless there was a misunderstanding or they were playing evil characters or whatever. So Wizards kept the gold, silver, and copper dragons, but cut the brass and bronze, which they figured weren't visually distinct enough from gold and copper, and replaced them with the iron and adamantine dragons. Later, in the Draconomicon 2, they brought back the brass and bronze dragons and added the cobalt, mercury, mithril, steel, and orium to 4th edition. If you've watched Josiah's videos, some of those names should sound familiar to you. But here's the thing. The Cobalt and Iron Dragons that appeared in 4th edition were essentially nothing like the creatures of the same name that appeared in prior editions. The 4E Cobalt Dragon was a savage, violent brawler with a breath weapon of freezing wind, and the Iron Dragon was a sly, sneaky ambush predator that breathed a cone of lightning. The same was true for the Adamantine Dragon. It shares nothing but its name with the version that appears in 2nd and 3rd edition. So, how is Josiah going to deal with such a dramatic departure from the established lore?
So I shall be doing what most people do when it comes to 4E lore, and ignoring it entirely.
You were the chosen one! It was said that you would destroy this!
Edition Wars.
Not join them!
So, needless to say, I was very disappointed. So disappointed that I decided to make this video. Here, I present to you the Dungeon Dad video that could have been, bringing the forgotten and unloved Adamantine Dragon of 4th edition into your D&D games. Again, if you want to know about the original Adamantine Dragon, I'd recommend watching Josiah's video, as he gives an excellent breakdown of that creature. As you might have guessed, this video is largely going to be based on the same format. Now, to avoid confusion for the rest of this video, when I say Adamantine Dragon, I will be referring to the version presented in 4th edition. If I have to reference the previous incarnation of this creature, I will instead call it the Adamantite Dragon, since that was its name on its first appearance. So, let's get into it. One of the legitimate criticisms of 4th edition D&D was the extremely sparse descriptive text that accompanied its monster stat blocks. The vast majority of creatures in 4E got maybe a paragraph explaining their backstory, and if you were lucky, another paragraph detailing their combat tactics. On top of that, the lore we were given was typically formatted as things the DM would reveal to players with a successful knowledge check, with a higher DC revealing more information. So even the lore we did get tended to repeat the same bits of information over and over, just with a little added context if the player got a higher roll. This problem was a little less severe with the more iconic monsters, like dragons, and for this video in particular, we have the advantage of an entire book of lore being written about the subject. The Draconomicon 2 Metallic Dragons was released in November of 2009, only a few months after the section Monster Manual for 4E. In this book, we got a whole page devoted to the new Adamantine Dragon to supplement the paltry 5 tiny paragraphs we got in its debut write-up. So, what did we find out? Well, not that much. The Adamantine Dragon is sometimes called the Cave Dragon or Underdark Dragon due to its preferences for lairing in deep subterranean caverns. In the Monster Manual, it is described as a tactician. It prefers to patrol its lair on foot, not only because its domain tends to be too cramped to spread its wings, but also because this allows it to familiarize itself with all the nooks, crannies, and terrain features of its hunting grounds that could be useful to itself or its enemies during combat. It will use its ability to fly to quickly reposition itself to attack or escape, but once the battle is joined, the dragon prefers to fight on the ground. The Monster Manual and the Draconomicon both emphasize the dragon's desire for dominance and leadership, both in battle and in daily life. The dragon will frequently conquer nearby settlements of subterranean humanoids, Dwerger, Drow, Grimlocks, Darrow, and the like, pressing them into service and declaring itself to be their ruler. It demands regular tribute and utmost respect and obedience from its subjects, and will not hesitate to attack anyone who defies or insults it in the slightest. However, as a lawful dragon, it takes its role as ruler very seriously and will protect its people and defend the land around its lair to the best of its ability. It is prideful and arrogant like all dragons, but it isn't cruel or malicious. It is willing to bargain, make treaties, and forge alliances, and will always keep its word. Provided its subjects obey and respect the Adamantine Dragon's leadership, it will do what it can to make them safe and prosperous, and will refrain from eating its loyal retainers unless it's truly starving. If an Adamantine Dragon can't find a suitable lair in the Underdark, it might settle for a mountainous region with deep cave systems. The Draconomicon suggests that this concession sometimes brings the Adamantine Dragon into conflict with blue dragons, who prefer similar habitats. In the Underdark, they compete with deep dragons, called purple dragons in 4th edition, despite this being, again, a totally different creature. This happens a lot in 4E, and 5E, evidently, if the new purple dragon knight subclass is any indication. But I digress. Adamantine dragons, as stated in the Monster Manual, are very strategic fighters. In addition to forcing their subjugated humanoids to serve as guards and scouts, they forge alliances with other intelligent monsters that live in and around their territory. Since they very much prefer to lead from the front and engage directly with their opponents, they will select allies with spellcasting abilities and other ranged attacks that supplement their melee-focused attack mode. They will isolate and bear down on the most dangerous combatant first, while their minions take potshots at the rest of the party. The dragon prefers to tank the hits for its allies as much as possible, only fleeing if it is seriously injured. If it can't escape, it will begrudgingly surrender and attempt to negotiate with its attackers. One interesting bit that the Draconomicon includes is the kinds of treasure that each breed of dragon prefers. In the case of the Adamantine Dragon, it appears that it likes silver. The book also includes a short sample dungeon for an Adamantine Dragon's lair, an adult named Vanathia, who has taken refuge in an old Dwerger stronghold infested by Grimlocks. Well, if you look at the treasure hoard included at the end of the dungeon, it does include more than 3 times as many silver pieces as gold coins, which is some refreshing consistency and attention to detail. Kudos to whoever wrote this section of the book. And that's about it. I've summarized pretty much everything the 4E sources tell us about the Adamantine Dragon. The only other appearance of this creature that I've been able to find is a short adventure in Dungeon Magazine number 182, The Wayward Wormling. It's part of the Chaos Scar adventure path that was released as part of a series during 4E's lifetime. Basically a series of little mini-adventures that you could drop into your game in a pinch, and which, when strung together, could add up to a somewhat coherent campaign of its own. In this one, the Adamantine Dragon Karanzaxis has been slain by last week's raid party, but not before giving birth to a son, Taloclaxis. The eponymous Wayward Wormling is taken in by a group of kobolds, the leader of which is an evil worm priest named Karza. It seeks to corrupt the impressionable young dragon into a brutal killing machine for her own ambition. She's been kidnapping random travelers and coercing the dragon into fighting and killing them in the hopes of filling him with a lust for blood and death. However, the PCs have a chance to appeal to his better nature and convince the wormling to turn on his evil allies and embrace a nobler path. If they succeed, they get an emotionally damaged dragon buddy with PTSD and crippling trust issues to follow them around for a while. Yay! This adventure doesn't really tell us anything new about adamantine dragons. It just reiterates that they aren't naturally cruel or evil, just proud with an innate sense of justice and resolve that makes them difficult to reliably control or influence, even as infants. Also, the treasure you get in this venture is only given in gold pieces, not silver, which is disappointing. As far as I can tell, that's all 4th edition has to tell us about the Adamantine Dragon. But interestingly enough, there might be something that 5th edition can tell us. See, there's another reason I was disappointed that Dungeon Dad skipped the 4E incarnation of the Adamantine Dragon. I get why he did that, of course. These are very clearly 2 entirely different creatures that just happen to share the same name, and he chose to go with the legacy version of it. But by ignoring the Adamantine Dragon of 4th edition, I think he missed an opportunity to draw a link between this metallic dragon and another group of forgotten dragons from D&D's history, a group Josiah is quite familiar with. Ferris dragons. These renegade metallics broke off from the followers of Bahamut eons ago, following instead the command of their supreme leader, Groglothor, an iron dragon of incredible size and power. This resulted in a civil war that saw most Ferris dragons driven to extinction, with the survivors fleeing to remote corners of the world. Josiah has done a video on the known breeds of Ferris dragon, iron, cobalt, nickel, tungsten, and chromium, but we know that there were several other breeds of Ferris dragons that have yet to be rediscovered. Adamantine dragons could be one of these lost breeds, having fled to the obscure corner of the multiverse in which the Nentir Vale is located. Why do I think these creatures are Ferris dragons? Well, I have a number of reasons. First of all, alignment. All Ferris dragons are lawful, just like all chromatics are evil and all metallics are good. In 4th edition, the Adamantine Dragon is technically unaligned, but then so are all the other metallic dragons. It was part of 4E's weird attempt to pull metallics out of their pigeonhole as the good guys, but the actual lore we get about this dragon, as noted above, goes out of its way to paint this creature as lawful neutral. Second, adamantine, as a metal in D&D, is canonically a ferrous metal. I swear I saw a video of Josiah's where he mentioned this, but for the life of me, I can't find it now. I think it was about the Rust Monster? Maybe it was Mr. Rex or Pointy Hat or some other D&D tuber, and I just got them mixed up? I don't know. If anyone has seen the video I'm talking about, let me know down in the comments, but I've double-checked this on various wikis, and sure enough, adamantine is considered a ferrous metal in D&D. Third, the cobalt and iron dragons are also presented as metallic dragons in D&D, but are ferrous dragons in previous editions. Granted, the 4th edition versions of these creatures, as I mentioned, are entirely different renditions that just happen to be called the same thing. Fourth, it makes sense of its lore. Why has this creature never been spotted before or since? Because it's in hiding. The Adamantine Dragon is one of the Ferris dragons who chose to oppose Groglothor and were forced to flee into exile. To avoid being hunted down and killed, it hides in deep, dark caves, in places where nobody has ever heard of, like whatever planet the Nentir Vale is supposed to be on. What better place to hide from your pursuers than a world so cursed and forgotten that even people here in the real world pretend it never existed? Ergo, in my rendition of the Adamantine Dragon, I've added it to the roster of Ferris dragons, and to solidify this change, I've given it the signature trait of all other Ferris dragons, metal sense, the ability to pinpoint, by smell, the location of all ferrous metals within a given radius, which increases with age category. But at this point, we're getting into the next section of the video, which is, of course... As noted before, the Adamantine Dragon loves to get up close and personal and soak damage for its allies in combat. In 4th edition, it had the Soldier role, which was the monster equivalent of the Defender, basically what an MMO would call a tank. Soldier monsters form a defensive line to stop opposing strikers from getting through to the casters in the back row, using forced movement and speed debuffs like prone, restrain, and slow to deny territory to the enemy. Many soldiers could mark targets, basically a taunt mechanic, to draw aggro and penalize players who ignored them and went for the squishies. The Adamantine Dragon is no exception to this playstyle. Like all dragons in 5.5, the Adamantine Dragon has a rend attack that combines the bite, claw, and tail routine from previous editions into one action. I've added the ability for the dragon to choose which damage type this attack inflicts for the sake of verisimilitude. Its breath weapon is a cone of sonic energy so powerful it knocks targets off their feet.
Dragon Ball.
At the start of the dragon's next turn, it releases a roar that deals unavoidable thunder damage to everything within a certain radius. So this guy's opening move is usually going to be to knock as many dudes as possible to the ground, then charge in and stand next to them so that they're forced to either eat an opportunity attack getting away, or take some unblockable damage when the dragon screams in their face. This strategy gets even more effective at higher levels when the dragon gains the ability to use multiple reactions per round. In addition to Metal Sense, I also gave this dragon Tunneler. Strangely, the original Adamantine Dragon doesn't have a burrow speed despite living in caves in the Underdark. I just decided to add this to my conversion since it just makes sense for a primarily subterranean creature to be able to dig. With this basic chassis established, each new age category increases the threat level and adds new abilities. Starting at the young stage, we debut spellcasting and add a third attack to its multi-attack action. In 5.5e, dragons are back to being innate spellcasters by default, a change I very much support. I start simple with Stone Shape and Detect Magic. The Adamantine Dragon is described as a strategic fighter that uses the terrain to its advantage, so the ability to reshape that terrain to form obstacles, open or close escape routes, and so forth is definitely on brand for what this guy is supposed to be like. The adult stage is when things really get crazy, though. We add legendary actions and legendary resistance to the mix, and we add Wall of Stone, Shatter, and Thunderstep to its spell list. Stone Shaper, a new trait I invented, buffs Stone Shape so it continues to be useful as the dragon gets bigger. It can now cast either that or Wall of Stone as a legendary action, allowing it to separate groups of enemies to divide up an encounter or throw up an obstacle to make strategic withdrawal easier. Adamantine Charge and Punishing Thunder are based on variant powers added in the Draconomicon 2. The former allows the dragon to instantly rush an enemy without provoking opportunity attacks, both stopping it from being pinned down and also letting it reorient itself to attack a vulnerable target. This, combined with Thunderstep's teleport, gives the dragon a lot of options for strategic positioning. As befitting a monster from 4th edition, the only edition where a battle grid is effectively mandatory. Punishing Thunder is based on the Corrosive Miasma legendary action of the new Green Dragon. It's intended to punish creatures attacking with ranged weapons or spells. Finally, the adult dragon gets Painful Resonance, a recharging bonus action attack that infuses a target at range with sonic energy that causes ongoing damage and dazes them until they pass a save to shake off the effect. The Ancient Adamantine Dragon adds Spike Growth and Earthquake to its spell list and gains Bloodied Resilience. While it's bloodied, the Adamantine Dragon gets resistance to the first damage it receives each turn. Across all age categories, this guy's basic strategy remains the same. Fly in, blast everyone, charge up to the weakest opponent, and tear them to shreds. If anyone tries to pin you down, surround you, or otherwise put you at a disadvantage, reposition and repeat from step 1. If necessary, isolate opponents that are a true threat so you can pick off their weaker friends first. Use terrain, both natural and magical, to keep your opponents on the defensive and impede their ability to maneuver around you and your allies. As a team player, employ minions with ranged attacks and spells that can pepper annoying enemies from afar, keeping the pressure on and ensuring they can't afford to focus fire. All in all, I think this dragon presents a unique challenge for players used to the more traditional solo boss fights. It also opens up more role-playing opportunities, as the Adamantine Dragon does actually value its loyal subjects and thus might be willing to parley with an enemy if the risk to its allies is too great. It considers itself the rightful ruler of its people, after all, and feels a genuine duty to protect and guide them, like a monarch would the citizens of their kingdom. Which, incidentally, touches on the last section of this video. Being intelligent, ambitious, powerful creatures, dragons in general present many opportunities to impact the world the players interact with. The Adamantine Dragon's preference for lairs in the Underdark or other subterranean locales makes this slightly less true, unless you happen to be running campaigns set in the Down Under. However, not all Adamantines get their first choice of caves, and in many cases, such as the published adventure we talked about earlier, a younger Adamantine Dragon is forced to make do with a lair closer to the surface. A younger dragon in particular might not be able to delve too deep due to the powerful monsters it might encounter that it's not strong enough to deal with yet, as well as the more convenient access to food and humanoid settlements it can conquer and press into service. As it ages, the dragon can open up new tunnels and burrow ever deeper, expanding its lair complex until it's sufficiently far from the surface that it's able to break off contact with the world above and subsist entirely in the Underdark. So this is the most straightforward plot hook to introduce an Adamantine Dragon into your game. The players hear of a mysterious young black dragon that has emerged from beneath the earth to terrorize the surrounding countryside, demanding tribute and fealty from each township and village it comes across, and brazenly declaring itself the new ruler of this land. Anyone who shows it any resistance or disrespect is cut down where they stand. But peculiarly, there are also reports of this dragon protecting one of these villages from a raiding party of orcs or goblins or what have you, and it doesn't seem to be consuming or torturing anyone the way you'd expect a black dragon to. In fact, as long as the populace kowtow to the dragon's demands and treat it with humility, it just seems to pretty much leave them alone and even come to their aid sometimes. To seasoned adventurers, this is going to instantly tip them off that this isn't your average black dragon they're dealing with. Nevertheless, the weight of satisfying even a young dragon's appetite for food and treasure is leading to a strain on the local villages, who are forced to work overtime to meet the dragon's demands. Though generally magnanimous, the dragon instantly slays anyone who steps out of line, leading a small group of townsfolk to send for help from any mercenary company who can liberate them from their new draconic tyrant. How this plays out from there is up to you and your party. They could simply slay the dragon, of course, or perhaps negotiate on behalf of the townsfolk, trying to find a more equitable solution where the dragon agrees to lessen the pressure it's placing on the people, or perhaps just find a more suitable fiefdom somewhere else. In fact, a less scrupulous party could even turn this into a business model. The dragon moves into an area, claims it as its domain, and starts grinding down the populace, prompting them to call for help. The adventurers roll in, defeat the dragon, and it flies away to set up shop somewhere else, conveniently managing to escape with the majority of its treasure hoard each time, minus a small percentage skimmed off the top. But okay, that's a pretty standard plot. What about something a bit more interesting? Well, playing off the idea of the Adamantine Dragon being a renegade Ferris that was driven into hiding, what if the players are actually contracted to find it by another Ferris dragon? This dragon, perhaps a tungsten or iron dragon, has heard rumors of an Adamantine dragon being in the area, and passes this information along to the party, offering them a reward in exchange for finding and eliminating this traitor on behalf of Grog Lothor. It does this because the Adamantine dragons have been hiding from their former kin for millennia, and know how they operate. But they wouldn't necessarily be expecting a group of random humanoid adventurers to be acting as spies and executioners on behalf of their ancient enemies. Again, how this develops depends on your group. The party could go along with the plot, kill the dragon, and collect their payment. Or perhaps they sympathize with the Adamantine Dragon, especially if the Ferris that hired them is one of the less noble breeds in their order, or if this particular dragon happens to lean more toward the good side of lawful neutral. Perhaps the Adamantine Dragon gives them a counteroffer, a percentage of its treasure to return to their employer and either slay them outright or, if this isn't feasible, simply lie to them, tell them the rumors were false or that they did slay the dragon as promised. Perhaps the Adamantine even allows them to take a few of its scales or some other token to present as proof of the kill. The scales being treasures in themselves, since the Wayward Worm adventure confirms that these can be forged into armor or shield, and many blacksmiths will pay a hefty price to acquire some. In exchange, the dragon takes the rest of its silver and leaves, going somewhere else to lie low for a few decades until the heat dies down. If the ruse is successful, the party now has a dragon that owes them a favor, and potentially another group of dragons that are going to be very pissed if they find out they were lied to, leading to many more potential plot lines in the future. A variation of this option is if the Adamantine Dragon actually contacts the party first. It's aware of a Ferris dragon scouting the area in search of renegades, and wants the PCs to either eliminate the target or else give it some reason to leave the area. Depending on the age of the hunter relative to the prey and relative to the party's level, this could play out a number of different ways. The PCs could spread false rumors of an Adamantine dragon in some distant land, or directly rat out the Adamantine that hired them in exchange for a greater reward, or just once again kill the target and collect their bounty. A third option is to draw on another piece of forgotten lore from 4th edition, the Spell Plague. As some of you might be aware, WotC explained the drastic changes to the setting of the Forgotten Realms in 4E by appealing to the death of the goddess Mystra, and the cataclysmic explosion of spellfire that resulted from it, warping the entire cosmos as the weave of magic that had held everything together came undone. Part of this event involved portions of Toril, the planet on which Faerun is situated in the Forgotten Realms setting, being magically transposed with a heretofore unknown sister world called Abir. As the Forgotten Realms campaign setting for 4th edition explained, in the beginning, the Primordials, or Dawn Titans, created multiple worlds by gathering together the raw creatia from the inner planes. They would cavort on these worlds for a time until they got bored, and then would destroy them and create a new one. This cycle continued until the gods arrived, found the chaotic world the Primordials had created, and set about stabilizing it, and populating it with mortal creatures to aid them in their work. This time, when the Dawn Titans came around to blow up their pet planet and recycle it, they found it defended by an army of Celestials and other servants of the deities, who would very much like to not be blown up, thank you very much. This led to the Dawn War, a pivotal event in 4th edition cosmology that ended with the Primordials being defeated and either destroyed or imprisoned in remote locations throughout the multiverse. In the case of the Forgotten Realms, their Dawn Titans were exiled to a pocket dimension that was cut off from all the other planes. A world called Abir, essentially an echo of Toril that they could do with as they willed, was given to the Primordials as a peace offering and a concession prize of sorts, before the gate was closed and the gods all pissed off back to the Astral Sea to sip tea and argue about the economy or whatever. Well, in this version of the cosmology, dragons were originally on the side of the Primordials, serving as their mounts in combat until the father of dragons, Io, also known as Asgarath, switched sides and joined the gods. Many of the dragons didn't take kindly to this and remained loyal to their Dawn Titan progenitors, and were thus sealed away in Abir along with them. But if you know anything about dragons, they weren't exactly keen on playing second fiddle to anyone, so it wasn't long before the dragons overthrew their elemental overlords, weakened from the Dawn War, and supplanted them as the unquestioned rulers of Abir. So, by the time the spell plague occurred, there would have been several eons where dragons reigned supreme over an entire planet, dividing it amongst the mightiest great worms, who rose to the level of gods. With no true gods or any extraplanar beings of any kind, including elves and other Feywild refugees, the land of Abir would have been a totally alien world with a completely unique culture of any on Toril. Tying all of this back to the Adamantine Dragon, we can now explain why this creature is so rare even among others of its kind. If it isn't a Ferris dragon, maybe it is the same creature as the Adamantite Dragon, or at least it was from the start. The creature we see in 4th edition could be a transplant from Abir, a planar dragon cut off from the outer planes and its source of power for untold millennia, forced to survive in a world saturated in elemental and primal power, completely divorced from anything of divine origin. This could be why it evolved to be superficially similar to a metallic dragon, breathing sonic energy instead of flames, losing its secondary breath weapon, and changing basically everything of its previous identity. And we don't even need to abandon the Ferris dragon flavor either. After all, as I mentioned, we also have the curious case of the Iron and Cobalt dragons in 4th edition being drastically different from their previous incarnations. Perhaps all of these creatures were stranded in Abir at some point. Renegade Ferris dragons and the loyal retainers of Roglothor who pursued them, trapped with no way to return home and no access to either their supreme overlord or any other authority but other dragons. They devolved and abandoned their old ways, becoming completely different beasts, linked to their past selves only in the names used to describe them. Whatever their connection to the past, we can use Abir as a setup for a plot set in the modern day. After all, the spell plague was only a few centuries ago in Dale's reckoning. That's nothing to a dragon. Perhaps an Adamantine dragon with a well-established lair and horde got transported to Toril during the Year of Blue Fire and wasn't returned home when the Second Sundering occurred. Now trapped in a world not its own, separated from the wealth and power it spent thousands of years accumulating, this dragon will stop at nothing to find a way to tear open the liminal barriers separating Abir and Toril, even if it means triggering another spell plague. Make it an ancient dragon and you have the makings of an epic campaign, having your players stumble upon this plot to break open reality itself that's been in the works for decades, working step by step to foil the dragon's plans in whatever small ways they can, while accumulating enough power and magical assistance to finally challenge the draconic overlord and his legions of subjugated human thralls in a climactic showdown before he can complete the arcane ritual that will unseal the ancient wards that separate the twin worlds. Failure means untold devastation wrought upon both worlds and the cosmos at large, as creatures, magic, and entire planes that were never meant to commingle start to inhabit the same place.
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
Well, everyone, thanks for watching. That's it for this one. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more 5th edition conversions, as well as content from other RPGs like Pathfinder, DC-20, and so forth. If you'd like for me to cover more forgotten monsters from 4th edition, especially the other pseudo-ferrous dragons that I mentioned in this one, let me know down in the comments. If you have any other suggestions for more topics you'd like to see me talk about, or have anything else to say in general, don't hesitate to leave it down below. In the meantime, I've been Chameleon X. See you next time.